January 1900. Frost laces the edges of wooden windows in small New England towns. Smoke curls from brick chimneys, cutting through the pale gray morning sky. A horse-drawn wagon rattles over icy cobblestones. Women bundle themselves in thick scarves and shawls, carrying pails of water from the frozen well. Inside modest kitchens, cast-iron stoves glow faintly, the air thick with the scent of simmering broth. Cornmeal, potatoes, and salted pork sit on rough-hewn tables, simple staples shaped by the seasons. Street vendors call out from carts, offering fresh eggs, butter, and winter apples. Across the country, in southern plantations and northern cities alike, the smells of everyday food defined life before refrigeration became widespread. Every meal was an exercise in resourcefulness, a balance between what could be grown, preserved, or purchased. The foods of 1900 America were both sustenance and culture, a reflection of work, climate, and tradition. Families prepared, preserved, and shared what the land and local markets provided. America was on the brink of transformation. Industrial cities swelled with immigrants seeking opportunity. Railroads carried goods across states, yet local markets still dictated daily meals. In the North, families preserved fruits through canning and drying, storing root vegetables in cellars to survive long winters. Meat was salted or smoked, milk delivered fresh from local dairies. Cornbread and grits appeared in southern homes, boiled hominy on Appalachian tables. The United States Department of Agriculture recorded wheat consumption over 200 pounds per person annually, while meat remained limited for the working class, more abundant in wealthier households. Sugar was a precious commodity, appearing mainly in tea, puddings, or rare confections. Street vendors offered sustenance to city dwellers. In New York, pushcarts sold pickles, pretzels, fried oysters, and salted fish. German bakeries produced rye bread, Italian grocers offered fresh pasta, Jewish delis introduced bagels and smoked fish. Every street corner told a story of cultural blending, adaptation, and survival. Kitchens in wealthier homes were laborious theaters of food preparation. Bread was baked from scratch, lard rendered, meat smoked. The tools were simple: copper pots, cast-iron skillets, wooden spoons, hand-cranked egg beaters. Breakfast was porridge or eggs with leftovers. Lunch often traveled to the fields or factories. Dinner was a ritual, a hearty stew or soup with bread, sometimes accented with fruit preserves or a sugar-sweetened dessert. Food was morality as much as necessity. Cookbooks like Fanny Farmer's Boston Cooking School cookbook emphasized hygiene, economy, and propriety. Meals taught discipline and reflected social expectation. Children learned early to value seasonal produce and frugality. In New England, apple orchards yielded pies and cider, while Midwestern farms supplied corn, pork, and beans to fill tables across counties. Southern plantations and rural homesteads relied on local crops: sweet potatoes, okra, and greens, often fried or stewed. The diet shaped bodies, workdays, and family life. Winter demanded preservation. Ice boxes, blocks of ice packed in wooden cabinets, kept milk and butter from spoiling in wealthier homes. Others relied on cellars, springhouses, and salt to store perishables. In urban apartments, immigrant families combined ingenuity with tradition, pickling vegetables, curing meats, and baking daily breads. Meals became a reflection of heritage. Italian immigrants served tomato sauces and fresh pasta. German families prepared sausages and rye bread. Jewish households maintained kosher rules and salted fish traditions. Every dish told a story of migration and adaptation, of what it meant to survive and belong. The industrial age altered production. Factories processed flour, canned vegetables, and preserved meats at unprecedented scales. Railroads ensured grains from the Midwest reached eastern cities. Yet, access to these goods depended on social class. Working-class families often relied on seasonal produce and cheaper cuts of meat, while wealthier households enjoyed imported fruits, refined sugar, and dairy products. Reports from the U.S. Census Bureau of 1900 noted that city families consumed 30% more processed goods than rural families. Meals were deeply tied to labor. Farmers rose at dawn to prepare porridge and coffee before tending fields. Factory workers carried lunches of bread, cheese, or cured meats to their stations. Women in homes or tenements baked bread, boiled beans, and rendered fats, maintaining the rhythm of sustenance for growing families. Food shaped the day, marked the seasons, and influenced health. Nutritional knowledge was rudimentary but growing, with doctors and writers emphasizing the importance of vegetables, milk, and moderate meat consumption. Children's diets reflected both necessity and culture. Cornmeal mush, oatmeal, or fried potatoes were common. Treats were reserved for special occasions, a slice of pie, molasses cookies, or the occasional sweet from a market. In rural schools, lunch often consisted of leftovers from home, sustaining small bodies through winter chores and long walks to class. Urban children might buy pickled vegetables or pretzels from street vendors, learning early to navigate the tastes of the city. Immigrant communities brought flavor, skill, and tradition. Germans introduced sausage making, lager brewing, and rye breads. Italians baked focaccia and pasta, while Eastern Europeans brought cabbage rolls and smoked fish. Southern African American households blended African traditions with locally available foods: okra, cornmeal, pork, and greens, often cooked in cast-iron skillets over open flames. These culinary practices shaped the American palate, creating diversity even within the limitations of poverty and seasonality. Preservation was a science and an art. Canning fruits like peaches, tomatoes, and apples provided sustenance through winter. Pickling cucumbers, beets, and cabbage allowed for meals beyond the growing season. Root cellars held potatoes, carrots, and turnips for months. Ice delivery became a seasonal ritual in cities. A block of ice meant milk stayed fresh, butter solid, and perishable foods safe. Every meal was connected to labor, land, and time. Morning breakfasts fueled workdays, lunch sustained effort, and dinner allowed families to gather, share stories, and maintain tradition. Food was intimate, practical, and social. Even holiday meals were constrained by season and wealth. Thanksgiving dinners in 1900 might feature turkey and pies for wealthier families, while simpler households relied on preserved meats and seasonal vegetables. Spring arrived slowly in the north. Mud softened the roads, melting snow revealing the first green shoots. Farmers inspected fields, preparing to plant potatoes, corn, and wheat. Markets filled with radishes, lettuce, and the season's first peas. The smell of wet earth mingled with smoke from stoves, where mothers boiled water for breakfast gruel and coffee. Breakfast remained simple: porridge sweetened with molasses, slices of bread spread with butter or lard, and eggs from backyard hens. Lunches were practical: cold meats, cheese, and thick bread carried to fields or factories. Dinner brought relief, often a stew, bread, and seasonal vegetables. In urban tenements, spring meant access to fresh produce from local markets. Immigrant families cooked dishes shaped by homeland traditions but adapted to American ingredients. Italian families simmered tomato sauces with garlic and onions, pairing them with hand-rolled pasta. German households baked rye breads and sausages, serving them alongside fresh radishes or cucumbers. Jewish families salted fish, pickled vegetables, and baked challah for Sabbath. These flavors interwove with the smells of city streets, where pushcarts sold fried oysters, roasted chestnuts, and hot pretzels, sustaining workers between shifts. Children learned early that seasons dictated taste. Spring brought new vegetables, but sugar and sweets remained rare indulgences, reserved for birthdays or holidays. Rural children helped preserve the previous year's harvest, storing root vegetables in cellars and tending the family garden. Preservation was a communal task, a blend of necessity and skill passed down through generations. Ice delivery, still limited to cities, allowed for short-term storage of milk and butter, crucial for infant and child nutrition. Summer shifted rhythms entirely. Heat pressed against wooden tenements and farmhouses alike. Gardens thrived. Corn, tomatoes, beans, and berries ripened simultaneously. Markets overflowed with fruit: peaches from Georgia, cherries from Michigan, strawberries from New Jersey. Farmers' children carried baskets to market stalls, exchanging produce for small coins or bartering for goods they could not grow themselves. Breakfast now included fresh berries over porridge or milk, buttered bread, and eggs collected that morning. Lunches were lighter: cold vegetables, bread, and occasionally leftover meat. Dinners featured stews thickened with seasonal vegetables, corn on the cob, or boiled potatoes with herbs from garden beds. Southern kitchens revealed another layer of American culinary tradition. African American households often relied on cornmeal for bread, grits, and puddings, supplemented by garden greens and fried pork. Fried chicken was uncommon except for Sundays or celebrations, but vegetables like okra, squash, and tomatoes appeared daily. Blacksmiths and farmhands brought home fresh meat from local butchers, preserved through salting or smoking. Meals carried both heritage and the necessity of hard labor. linking taste and tradition to survival. Across the Midwest, the vast wheat fields and prairies produced staples that defined the American diet. Bread made from locally milled flour was a daily presence. Farmers and laborers relied on beef and pork, often prepared in one-pot stews with root vegetables. Butter and cheese from family dairies complemented these meals. Seasonal fruits, apples, plums, and berries were preserved as jams or dried for winter use. The cyclical nature of planting and harvesting dictated what people ate, binding food to the rhythms of work, weather, and soil. Canning transformed summer abundance into winter sustenance. Tomatoes boiled into jars, beans and peas sealed in glass, and fruits layered with sugar created reserves for the harsh months. Reports from the USDA in 1905 detailed growing canning production, highlighting the increasing importance of preserved foods in American diets. This practice ensured continuity, allowing urban and rural families to eat more consistently throughout the year. Canning became both a science and an art, combining hygiene, timing, and skill. In the cities, industrialization introduced new foods and convenience. Bakeries churned out bread for thousands. Meatpacking plants in Chicago and Kansas City processed beef and pork, shipped via rail to distant markets. Street vendors expanded their offerings, selling ready-to-eat snacks to workers between shifts. Pickled vegetables, fried dough, and salted fish created a landscape of taste shaped by speed, necessity, and novelty. For children, sweetened milk and molasses cookies were small joys amid daily labor and long walks to school. Technological advances subtly changed kitchens and diets. Iceboxes became more common among urban households, though still rare in rural homes. Hand-cranked egg beaters, food mills, and coffee grinders lightened labor. Recipes adapted. Stews thickened faster, breads rose more consistently, and custards or puddings became achievable for households previously constrained by time and equipment. Cookbooks instructed in the efficient use of these tools, bridging tradition and innovation. Autumn arrived with a visual and culinary feast. Fields turned gold, leaves crunched under boots and wagon wheels, harvest dictated menus. Pumpkins, squash, apples, and grapes filled homes. Bread baked daily, pies, puddings, and preserves abounded. Children picked apples, helping create cider, jelly, and pie filling. Farmers butchered livestock for winter, curing meats or smoking hams to last months. Thanksgiving became a cultural anchor, a day of shared abundance, though still unequal across class and region. In New England, tables displayed turkey, potatoes, cranberry sauce, and pie. In rural South Carolina, sweet potatoes, greens, cornbread, and preserved pork dominated the feast. Winter returned, harsh and long. Kitchens filled with the smell of simmering soups and stews, their richness reflecting the stored harvest and preserved meats. Root vegetables, beans, and grains provided sustenance. Pickled vegetables and cured meats added flavor. Urban dwellers adapted to scarcity, relying on markets, street vendors, and preserved foods. Ice blocks kept milk, butter, and seasonal fruits usable for weeks. Wealthier homes enjoyed imported fruits, sugar, and meats, while working-class families made do with simpler ingredients, stretching resources to feed children and sustain laborers. Across the nation, immigrants maintained traditions while embracing American produce and tools. Italians introduced fresh pasta, tomato sauces, and olive oil. Germans baked breads, prepared sausages, and adapted pickling methods to local vegetables. Eastern Europeans brought smoked fish, cabbage rolls, and pastries. African-American kitchens blended African heritage with Southern ingredients, creating dishes like gumbo, collard greens, and fried okra. Every family table became a canvas of adaptation, blending old and new, necessity and celebration. Food education grew alongside dietary science. Publications emphasized hygiene, nutritional balance, and economical cooking. Farmers' bulletins advised on seasonal diets, while cookbooks taught mothers to stretch ingredients, preserve abundance, and maintain health. Children absorbed lessons at home and in schools, the value of milk, vegetables, and moderation in sweets. Nutritional knowledge was incomplete but rising, a foundation for the modern diet. Markets reflected the nation's diversity. Urban stalls overflowed with vegetables, meats, breads, and ready-to-eat snacks. Rural markets centered on local crops and livestock. Prices fluctuated with season and availability. Laborers adjusted consumption accordingly. Reports in the Journal of Home Economics from 1910 documented calorie intake differences by class and region, noting scarcity in working-class diets contrasted with richer households' abundance. These differences shaped health, growth, and labor capacity across generations. Industrialization and immigration reshaped American tables. Railroads transported wheat, corn, fruits, and meats, expanding access. Immigrant laborers brought knowledge, skill, and flavor, influencing menus and street foods. Communities celebrated holidays with familiar dishes, sometimes adapted to local ingredients. Meals became cultural touchstones, binding families, preserving heritage, and navigating scarcity. By 1910, America's diet reflected both continuity and change. Tradition persisted in rural kitchens, guided by the land and seasons. Innovation appeared in cities through industrial food, preservation, and street culture. Each meal told a story of labor and reward, scarcity and ingenuity, heritage and adaptation. Families ate to survive, to celebrate, to educate, and to connect. The foods of the 1900s were both foundation and expression, shaping American life before mechanized convenience, refrigeration, and mass advertising would transform the landscape entirely. The smells of simmering soups, baking bread, and frying vegetables lingered in homes, marking the passage of days. Markets, street corners, and kitchens teemed with activity, each ingredient carrying weight and history. Iceboxes hummed quietly in corners, root cellars preserved the past summer's harvest. Children learned patience, observation, and skill. Immigrants balanced tradition with adaptation. Laborers shaped meals around work. Holidays punctuated ordinary days with abundance and ritual. By examining the tables of 1900s America, one can see the heart of a nation, hardworking, inventive, and connected to the land and community.